다 참으로 도마 섬지다. 오늘 하버드 라브르 치미기 나놀리아 예베 안다 개와나 버수레 다는 신기 롬녀 소레 다는 신 대표 참으로리아게 도마 섬지샤이.
First, I'd like to greet everyone here at my first visit to Harvard University and Harvard Divinity School. I want to greet all of you, professors, aspiring scholars, students, and everyone who's here.
지다당에 인지 탭자를 인지 차교지 잡신가라. 다 임비네야 디 하버드 라브르 시민들이 나로를 잡아야는데 잡로하던데 지레면도 세상 아니 가수래다 아줄이야 기규야 보지 세상 안데 기규도 균이야 보잖아요. 교란디스 되라죠.
I can actually speak some English. I feel that I speak it somewhat poorly. I certainly don't think my English is up to Harvard standards. So therefore, I brought a translator.
The wonderful translator, I think. Yawa kama bokundi chudu ba ta Americalia pebre. Yanzi jana peg number sange bege ta kharjuji lama chimbe chene ji chige nujolia an chusho ze dimbenge ngashe rujikche tu chadiore. 안 제상 공대 폐쇄 하버드리아도 나버래 제가 당기 공지 순수하대 아주 잡으지요를 도모든 잡으요 가시 알이야 디스코를 가르사대 I did plastic surgery that looks like a little bit like that is kind of joke 딱 한다 양결 들이야 녀도 저한테 가보샤 총스 아니 다는 신기 아주 벽이 알라름에 우치 고스장고 좀 내 폐쇄 딱 한다 드리지기다 루규기 그림이에도 두심이 인두산에 디디지나 드레인두스티나로리아 라바도 미센디 섭젠디나로리아 야 좀데 알아는 가보시다 좋으셔.
As Professor Jomso mentioned, the 16th Jawon Karmapa came to the United States as one of the first Tibetan Buddhist masters to bring the Tibetan Buddhist teachings to Western countries, and during that time did indeed, as she said, visit Harvard University. She remarked that my face resembles his. Perhaps I've had plastic surgery in order to make it so. And then he said that's a kind of
Some
joke.
people say.
But in any case, whether I resemble my predecessor or not, I'm very, very glad to be back here. And also in consideration of that I'm following on a previous visit by His Holiness the Dalai Lama to this very church.
다들 제림디 가르쳐 드린 제림디 망고 싶으시제 다른 샤부에는도 자와서 싶으시제 안에 망고 싶으시제 안데 도공공다 야 베기시하고 그래서디 there's kind of too much some of the 샘디 성승을 차디 나로리아 안지 계시하고 this 커버시 차리도 예민해 강다야 안 드린 예시아디 단 토픽디 다기 수문은 신기 드림 이즈집에 나로리아 저불링기 다지 소샤 섬을 위견로 소샤 남리아 가수레다지 심구르세나라도 야나지 텔리아 가르슬라가 take care 컨디션을 사디고 저지 티란 데베톤제
I've had a busy day, actually a little bit too busy, especially when you consider that my main thing today was to come here and address all of you this talk. But nevertheless, I will do my best to address the topic you've presented. how to care for life, living things on Earth, this planet, in the 21st century.
지당다 남주 당예시에야 사람도 다 가다 나머 상계비 취어난거다 principles 말베 지 닝부르 지데 가라서나 안 딘중기 다와서나 장도 야나 딘중기 다진탕시야디 차디 어르섬트비
To start with, the real essence of the Buddha's teachings is interdependence, the view that everything is interdependent.
이내야 디 interdependence 디 타와당 떠줍당 야나지 신이르바 섬으로 philosophical 다 진지기 신이르베기 신이르바 점마이마 다들 컨디션이 아주 미지나로리아 진저베다 간다 딘중기 진탄데 미지나로 컨디션이 냠수 량당 다는 신기 엔다지 bring it to emotional level sanadado kandarjis 지 심소로 돌려 컨디션이 엔디 딘중기 지 진탄데 컨디션이 삼동으로사디 하장 개침부지 통해요.
But I think it's extremely important that we not leave the doctrine or idea of interdependence as a mere philosophical idea, but that we actually ask ourselves the question, how can I live according to interdependence? How can I apply interdependence in my life, including my emotional life?
두름 있으시면 나올이야. social media에 다나 신기지 information errors 요아래 채팅 뒤럽스 요아래 제선 디나로리 아주 채팅디 딩디그 트위젤 데네 좀불링버디 찍le 찍된 임버디 응알레장 응세 되도 심버지다 넘버 3 심버지 임버 아주 참에 신기하래.
We can all surely observe that in this 21st century, through social media and other technologies, in this era of information, as we call it, our mutual interdependence is even more obvious than ever before.
이내 아수리직 information somewhere 다지 니즈 가수라다지 망부치 아들이야 다 망부치야 디치비 핑계와 말해 삼삼 아주 냥 아주 사블이야지 more information we get 다 우리 니즈디 아주 지세로 자로 저와 차브레디냐 직전에 우리 니즈 돌려야 될 점이 맞아버치지 우리 니즈 돌려야 information 많잖아 아주 디 꾸그런 줄 누구예요 그렇지 머리가 살도 그렇지 이제 전화요.
However, information alone is not enough. Well, from one point of view, we might say that the more information we have, the clearer our situation becomes. Sometimes we have so much information that it's too much, and it actually obscures us and prevents us from understanding our situation.
Hindustane conditions dinjung tawa sadi chikashure dinjegi information zamayba understanding chi lebenang understanding zamayba de ningnang sanadando kanda chi ngoyu choye nanglola kanda che lalen tarwa sadi gesimchi chadi yore.
So interdependence is not just about the sharing of information or an understanding we might arrive at in our brains, in our heads. It is about sharing the feelings in our hearts and about our real experience.
다다디 배능에 충두가게 전화를 쉐입니다. 아 충두산에 더 로스음시 급더래. 디급리아 아주 페유리아 아나 springtime and don't go to spring way. Hello.
Autumn.
Autumn. Okay. Oh, I thought he's asleep. Autumn Ray. Tatanga Chica Karakimamino, Kada Payulia. And it was a drop in Zam, and then as you Kala Zuru de Shachiara, Cheza, and Shai in Juzan, Azugi, Gozo Somana, Semgentinde. 아주 잠잠 또 뒤주질이야디 심지 세요래 이 심지 세베 걸이야 아주 심지 세단디 아주 배 심지 세단다 디 지가르에 factory 지 뒤주치라나 지 많이 받다 간다 지 심지 세단디 레라버지 야마 야마나 지가르다지 제가 마체디 심지 카드 받담지 직시하고 대대라고 시고만 심지 레라고 멋이지 우마다 주주 삼선 주주 제가 고면도 야버지 정면 다가다 시부정 고 주주 앞에 들어 잡지 배디 수부 참아 응이나 수부 참아 응이나 잡지 도시 시라서 쉬어래 디주 심지 세베 가라 다당 알아 세버 정도 디주산에 배지 대라 마수에 버르지 닝래야 마수에 버르지 소환르지 다 가수로다 닌지 세네 저거다 닌지 세야 돼 가수기 남주 지 남배기 시대야 그 닌지 친이 망보지 시대야 네 닌지 이면 하고 맞다 다이네 다지 셈네 지 제모 메이베 지 문수에 봐 그러지 닌자 봐 그러지 네지 랑게 랑게 용대야 주상되게 다이네 급지 세주 딘데 세야마다 심지에 세자 방바슈사 샤야 샤렌스 드는 양 샤서 그러면 지분 니가 냠도록 내 급지 뒤산에 참자 내 능미 랑 고고단지 심지에 세베 거 나치리여나 근데 내지 디스터브 지여자 삼성 고고단지 질 근데 니주 좀 그래
I can remember an experience that I had as a child when I was 3 or 4, where I was living then. In the autumn, as nomads, we would have to slaughter some animals since we relied upon meat as one of our principal sources of food. Now, nomads, of course, don't get their meat in a market that's been slaughtered in a factory. You have to do it yourself, and it's not easy. Mostly, it was done by my family. They would bind them out.
No, not my family. Somebody be hiding something.
Oh.
Mostly, yeah, okay.
Okay. Mostly, it was done by
people
binding the jaws or mouth of the animal so it would slowly suffocate. This is an agonizing way to kill an animal, as it takes, at least in my memory, almost half an hour sometimes for the animal to die. Before it's dead, it's covered in sweat from its agony and slow suffocation. And I clearly remember this. And I remember the way I would feel as a young child watching this. I had an unbearable feeling in my heart. I wouldn't want to call it compassion. I don't know if what I felt then corresponds to a strict definition of compassion or not, but it was a very intense feeling. So that it got to the point where when the slaughtering was going to occur, they would trick me and send me somewhere else so I wouldn't be around and wouldn't disturb them doing it.
Did you sound that no educated somewhere? And Dana Singi, not much knowledge someone in a Koran, the German memes on our to share. That the Lord Jungalia, Gamacha. That the name Gomben Gamabe Chilia, Deje. And the highly educated somewhere, she Namasangi with Churchok, she Yamle, that Lobjon Tobo the Chevre. Says me, Mauji Samanada, the Gamaba Kashweta, till Deje, Tago Shiviji Kashwetaji. Spiritual qualities somewhere. Churchok, you intend to be Shiviji Yagachi, get some of the Tingle about the Mauji. Tai Bine, near those far Chidelon, some Dundusan. Gasha Chimmy does some of that day, Kanislauda, go back to see some of them, woman needs you some of the Tambekala. 급 뒤뒤기 예 춘중 급기 쩌마 마인밤 쇠메기 니지 텐더지 다다지 쩌마 쇠니 지 삼당가치 균센다 망보다 다다 균센 망보시엔데 여러 균센 망보시에 philosophical reason 다 망보지 시엔데 여러데 이나 오마데는 신기 지 가르레데 배 really sorry 지 쩌마 마인바지다 다나신 쇠도 메바지 진짜 용하데 오마는 시죠 카부쳐 제가 뒤균센데네 예 그뒤네야 급지도 춘준 거기 제가 마인비다 생부 전한들래 that really appreciated Senandado. I miss that. Samarada.
Now, remember that at that time, at the age of 3 or 4, I was a very young boy with no education whatsoever and not much knowledge or experience of things. But nevertheless, I had this natural and genuine feeling of sorrow and compassion. Well, at the age of 7, I was recognized as the Karmapa and put on a high throne and began to receive a very thorough education. People usually, when they think of the Jawan Karmapa, they think of someone who must have tremendous spiritual qualities. But I have to say to you that when I think back and remember the unfabricated compassion I felt for those slaughtered animals as a young and uneducated child, I miss that degree of genuine, unfabricated feeling. And I think that in some ways, it surpasses the compassion that I can generate now through lots of education and thought and so on. And therefore, I really appreciate the memory of that uneducated compassion I had as a child, and I miss it.
Trindu상 아주 망부치리야 충주이네 베나지 부춘주이 베걸이야 전신 다 망부치리야 다 가주래 아주 망부치리 생계기 참지 뉴바선한라도 참지 연데 아주 생계 용대하지 근데 서도가 가시서도 부진 무용나 디디틀리 부신다데 무용을 저서도아 디 사고 지기질에 초안으로 신경 알았어. 그래서 간다야 디 미지보면 봐. 둔돌라서 심전에서 동네와 준주산에 전신이 가술이야지 가서 sympathies는라도 야나지 그저 동해 충분된 가술이야 하고시 초하게야지 전신이 아주 용대요. 다디 최예매 기제 말에 안다는 신기 로종 예매 기제 말에 간당 아주 좀 미지 다 인베션을 전신 용대하지 이바이지
I think that children, especially very young children, have an innate capacity for genuine love and kindness. For example, how often have we all seen that when one child is crying, another child will immediately start crying as well because they recognize the feeling and they naturally sympathize with it and share it. I think we're all capable of this, not just with other human beings. I think our sympathy can extend to all living beings, including animals. And I don't think this has anything to do with whether we regard ourselves as spiritual or not, or whether we are educated or not. I think it is an innate part of being human.
다이비는 아주 차롱용스디 구유 문자와도 내다 문자와도 되네. 아주 되게 생기기 뒤에 지파 루브르기 지메 디베서르지다 루브르기 지 내다다 되게 토네 지메 디베서르 제제. 엔지 다바지 미망고지 엔다간다 가수다지 도나 아주기 인지기 사마데 지 로는 로 버튼나 신지 on off 자유에 소리 딱 간다 망고지 도시한 연디거라 망고지기 에는 아주 배시 첨부 쳐주잖아 아니 윤세 망고삼 등으로 다 부인주잖아 그 가르 템베 있는다고 초와들 연셔거래 다 첨부 쳐서 다 삼다 이 제고 예나미나 나라는 개변 예나미나 너기 예나미나서 다 삼아 망고지 땅제 초지네 아주 가수지 grown up somewhere. Kanda langsur gay understand azu chochine and karshwataji yunde charros or the chochine tang of careful to charge that young can karshwatis and god devon to charge that can they show us some bonding in the charge and the digit to and dakanda nizu mangboji tang and the javasham in the yana other javasham in the chesang alchudome some ruchi yana dan ning de chudo shabina ngala kangye yoser samsaro ta de ni zu mangboji ton risk mangboji tongje ni ji to ne tang azu semgi tengi ge yebe en da kanda jaware ninjire en dige de ba ji karshwe ba tme dibe sur chana.
As we grow up, we are subjected to various changes in our environments and circumstances. And I think that these can cause our innate compassion to become obscured. It's almost as though we're born with the compassion button switched on and it gets switched off. Because as adults, now we need to think about it. It doesn't come as easily to us. And when we think about the suffering of another, and the possibility of taking responsibility for helping them, we always think, well, would doing so harm me or help me? How would it affect my life? In one way, this is because we are, as we like to say, grown up. We're educated, and we're therefore careful, even clever, maybe strategic. And so we're clever enough to think, well, this doesn't involve me. I don't feel connected to that. And also to worry about the risk that we might be posing to ourselves by feeling compassion for others. And I think all of this tends to obscure or repress our innate love and compassion.
Says a ninja sadi, not to think of ninja samare, ninja sometime. To generate some of the change. The Hindustani, that the younger Shevala as encouragement. That Digi Niji Chegor is as Mayba, and Niji Chendu Gitakanda. Cartre, voluntarily some of dedicated Yana, Simshu down, Faxam Yogad, Kitchen. Tindi Chabina and Shine Niji Saji. Chazan. Faxamdang dinde the volunteer summer that dinde somebody in jigi zawar chadi user.
Compassion, after all, is not a thought. It is a feeling. And it's not something that we can really inculcate or even encourage particularly. Compassion is something that each of us has to volunteer through our natural courage and benevolence. And that benevolence is really the root of compassion.
The Hindustani, Azudi, Tangi Shibana Singi, Azu, Tinjung Tawas and Dandu, and the Tawa Jiboma, Takanda, Tinjung in Tansade, Mizina Loliang Azu, the Mursu Azu, Yamsunyo, Takanda, Chigili and Javachadi, Simsi Jigi, China Nuju. Nuju Pinjun Javachadi Vita, Dana Singi and Nangi Ju Simjan Digity in Pinju Jigil and Javachadi. Andonachi, Mazugi, Kala Sabinare, Tulosh Gabinare, Tanaji, Ug, Juatsunja Imina, Pinju Jigil in Devaja Madabe, Azuta, Rungsu to Banaji, Mavashi, to Shadiore, they do Digun Zeladene, and it Simjan Shengi. Nedan Selanjando, Simjan Shengi, that Didudi, Sosugi Didugi Chashi and Chadior. Today, Mijun Zeldene and Ranking Angi, Gen Kuyak Samlo, Gen Kundu somebody, Tindijin Kashweta, Nedan of D. Then God service and Andrado, then God service you will ping them though. Kada di Nedan de Liaj, Unat and Semne, Nyamsun Yoruchi, gave a tone. 아니 신내지 가서에 긴구르기 다 이제 닝도부터 되면 니지 개토야지 니지 대 닝도부터 되면 니지 다 이제 개토야지 용습해서
As I said, interdependence, while it is a concept or an idea, must be more than an idea or outlook or view. It has to be something that we experience. We need to experience and recognize the interdependence of this environment and all of the beings who inhabit it, and the interdependence among beings, between any one being and all others. The food we eat, the clothes we wear, the air we breathe has all arisen through the actions of other beings. We cannot survive independently. We cannot eat, wear clothes, or breathe independently. The more keenly we feel this, the more we will feel that the welfare or well-being of other beings, their happiness and suffering, is very much part of our own. And that will help us begin to take responsibility for the welfare of other beings. But it's not enough simply to begin or set about taking such responsibility. We have to actually feel within us that type of compassion that is genuinely courageous.
안다 양gar 당기 잡아지 쉬위 제가 나 충주 거기서는 당기 쉬어나지 아니 샤서야래 다나시 샤라 가보시나요 디상 미카시 안 끼지도 저랑 칼라 가르 가고예스 다 칼라 가르 가고예스 라두산다 샤라 가고예스 로르지다 고베나 태요 다 얘네 다다 샤서야 말어 안데 다 샤라 가고예 람네 초스게 메서 제 라운지 샤키슈 생겨서 괜찮죠. 안드레인 두산에 다 딘데제 안디 치즈 야갈레네 아니 가다 샤사 참르샤르 다디 조디 아주 망부지기 아주 샤스게 야르데네 샤디 칸에 정부디 샤디 근지 정부디 아주라라 망부지 통고야만 다 당기되는 사바도 변화 지 가서 총계를 야게징 총계를 지나라라 아니 샤디그 사람 마켓 나는데 녀간도야 빠기 제시하래 다들 가네요 메모치 신거 봐. 너 부춘주도 하고 이 다들 버지지 마켓은 수혜시 기용만 해서 마도 디셈진지 비게 예버지 대바 세네 디네 총대버지 망부치 신거 봐.
To return to my experience as a child, I ate meat, and actually I liked meat quite a lot. Sometimes, even now, people will say, what's your favorite food? And if I were to answer honestly, my favorite food would still be meat, but I can't say that because I gave up eating it. I don't eat it. So I stopped eating meat several years after arriving in India. And part of the reason for this is that if you think about it, most of us who eat meat never really see where the meat we eat comes from. Especially if you live in a large city in a developed nation, you probably buy your meat in a supermarket and it's packaged in plastic and so on. To the extent that a small child that goes to such market would probably imagine that meat is a thing that they make there in that supermarket. And there's no sense that it's the body of an animal.
Barbecue, I was taking insulin. Barbecue pessimboare, barbecue taking insulin. Tang barbecue the good era. You don't jelly, 신의 아메리카 레벨에 드디어 가셔서 자 근데 바바큐 사죠 마서 바바큐 로게르 고더로 이나다 오늘 아메리카 레벨잖아 드디어 사 말에 샤 미사야 담자 체자라 바바큐 사도
When I
디 아주 디 아메리카 연디 디두자 랑가데 텍사스 바베큐 된데 통수 다이네 사람인도 다 점주도 쇼디아레
When I arrived in India in the year 2000, and I met several American friends who would say, well, when you come to the United States, we'll offer you barbecue. We have this amazing way to cook meat in our country called barbecue. Well, by the time I got here, the first time in 2008, I'd already committed to never eating meat again. And so it was too late. So I never actually got to taste barbecue. But I would be driven along highways and I'd see Texas barbecue on the side of the road. And it would make me salivate, but it's too late.
제가 디 준제 때에 아주 딩두기 소외 내란 직전에 직가루 컴포트 섬을 레라로 진답될 진 초진이 니즈카싱 아주 통고 당기지 않으신 왜 니즈카시 디디 샤드주 사다가 서요아르디네 마세 콘리아 디 유림도 스텝 디 가리면 내가 아주 통고 디 준제 때에 awareness 말하다 디게 가슈에지 에지 the interdependent awareness ko adi shivji cash much chade
Nowadays, well, from one point of view, we're made extremely comfortable by the way we do things. The way we do things also conceals a great deal from our sight, such as the process that culminates in the meat we eat. And so we lose an awareness of our connection to things, and that we have to therefore deepen our awareness of our interdependence.
Hindustan da paji kendri shia de ga zu yimba da kana de Hindustan ne da ke chi shu di kandar ni ji sa di ka ja apathy samare da de zobling tholia ji disaster samare de ge da zobling yan ji gbo chen bo da ji ne da chen ji gbo chen bo wong yong ga re di na ne the disaster ji di azulia 참선 매워 되게 disaster 지금 알아 텔레데에 미망고지 가지고 겸매방 괴매방 안다는신 고설 처음에 근데 내단 지금 토네 나 동해 망고지 한데도 사야 알아 이나 디 disaster 디 가래서나 직전에 가서도 냠도 예대없이 아주 하마오지 아파티사데 아주 이게 셈이야 녀지 대대없이 이 disaster想怎么下来全的那个就不得做아주 avoid些图要的因为啊听这个 disaster 的所属的什么原因上근데 avoid下的搞不出去了的这是第一个在那上面他说的长生这样就引导的点吧是那样的要开始的 responsibility interdependent responsibilities la de heavy burden de ne ma yim che ta de zhuo wa dan jie ba yin do de ba de ge ngin gong ge sam ba zhe gua de ge shim de sam tong.
That's more or less all I'm going to say, but I want to leave you with one thought. When we talk about having compassion regarding the many disasters that occur in this world, usually we think of things such as horrific epidemics, wars, violence, starvation, and so on. But there is one source of disaster that we often fail to recognize, which is a lack of love. A lack of love can cause people to have no help when they need help, and no friend when they need a friend. So in a sense, the most dangerous thing in the world is apathy. We think of weapons, violence, warfare, and disease as terrible dangers, and indeed they are. But we can take measures to avoid them. But once our apathy takes hold of us, we can no longer avoid it. So I urge you to feel a love that is courageous. Not courageous in the sense of the grudging undertaking of a heavy burden in feeling responsible for the welfare of others, but the joyous acknowledgement of your interdependence with each and every other living being and with this environment itself.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.